Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. And we'll continue this morning in the 145th Psalm and starting in the fourth verse, Psalm 145, beginning in verse 4. And again, this psalm is strictly, you'll notice in the superscription, said it's a psalm of praise. And as I said, this psalm is one that really, I think, epitomizes what most of us think of when we think of the book of Psalms. That it is again, just a litany of various um, aspects of God and His work that David is praising the Lord for. And so as we'll start, we're going to cover kind of a long section today. Start in verse 4. And again, let's go through to start with the seventh verse. And David is not only praising God here, but he's making an important point to us. David is pointing out that everyone has a responsibility to praise God and then to teach their descendants to praise God as well. And again, the various words that are used here and the nature of those words tell us that it is an ongoing process, that we never get to the point. For example, verse 4 starts, "One generation shall praise thy works to another." That the words that are used there are words that one generation praises thy works to another, who praises thy works to another, who praises thy works to another. That the praising, the teaching is never complete. As long as there is time, as long as there are generations, that we continue. We have a duty to tell our descendants, who again pass it on to their descendants, about the works of God. He goes on and says, I will speak of the glorious honor of thy majesty, of the wondrous works. Men shall speak of the might of thy terrible acts, and I will declare thy greatness. They shall abundantly utter the memory of thy great goodness, and shall sing of thy righteousness. And so he just lists here for us the various um, works and things that he says we are to teach our descendants, to teach to one another. He says, I'm going to do that by telling my children and my grandchildren about the goodness, the greatness of God. I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them about His wonder, about the miracles that He has performed. I'm going to share my testimony, the experiences that I have been through, and the times that God has delivered and intervened on my behalf. The greatness. When he says terrible acts, he's not doesn't mean terrible as in our traditional, when we say, "Oh, that's a terrible thing to have happen." It's a marvelous and amazing act. His glorious honor, His majesty, His wondrous works, His righteousness. David says all these things are things that I intend to teach my family, my descendants, and they are things that everyone who loves God, everyone who calls themselves by the name of God should pass on and should um, teach our children. You think about all the things that we do pass on to our children, our grandchildren. Many people really get involved and want to teach their children sports or those kind of things. What if we would spend a fraction of that time teaching our descendants, children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, whoever about the greatness of God. And then the common question that comes from there is, if we don't teach our children of the greatness of God, the good works of God, the love of God, who will? They're not going to get it from television. They're not going to get it in school. Probably not going to get it from their friends. If we, as the elder spokesman, I guess you'll use that word, as the elder spokesman of our family, have a duty, have an obligation, let's face it, we have the opportunity, we have the privilege of sharing with our children of the wonderful nature of God. What a marvelous privilege that is. When I say duty and obligation, it almost sounds like a burden around our neck, but it is a privilege for us to be able to share with our children. What better could we teach our children than of the love of God and His mercy and His wonderful deeds? And he continues by saying, "The Lord is gracious, full of compassion, slow to anger, of great mercy. He's good to all. Tender mercies are over all His works. All thy works shall praise thee, O Lord, and the saints shall bless thee." And so these three verses just continue David talking about the very characteristic of God, that He's gracious, slow to anger, full of mercy. He just is describing again the very nature of God. And I think personally, I'm going to say I think that's one of the most important things we can do for our children, for our grandchildren, is teach them the true nature of God. Because our young people today are getting, they're receiving an image of God that is inaccurate. They're receiving a lot of bad, faulty information about God and who He is and His characteristic. And so David just reminds us here of something that's extremely important in our role as parents. There's a lot of things I want to pass on to my children, grandchildren, a lot of things that I want them to learn and know. Um, but I think as I look at my own circumstance, um, I think of of people in my family. I think of my grandpa in particular, who just by his lifestyle, by the way he managed his life, by his demeanor, um, by his, um, I guess you'd have to know him. Just by the way he handled problems, treated people, um, showed me so much about what God can do in a person's life. I think about my great grandmother's faith. Um, and while she wasn't necessarily a highly educated person, she knew enough to know to put her faith and her trust and her confidence in God, and knew that He had taken care of her and been with her throughout her life. And so I want one day for that to be, if you think about it, we're all leaving a legacy of some kind. Is there a better legacy to leave than to have taught our children, our grandchildren, our descendants about the love and the nature and the character of God? And I'll leave you with this challenge today. Um, what legacy are you leaving your children and your grandchildren? What are they learning about God from you? Um, what will they remember about our life? Will they remember that we were, a good fisherman, or you know, good good athlete, or we took them shopping, or we were a good cook, or so, and all those things are great. All those things are wonderful. But most important, what legacy are we leaving behind about who God is? Think about that today, and to start today leaving that legacy. Have a good day. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning.